The air in our part of the city, down below, has a taste. It's not something you notice after a while. You just sort of get used to it. The way you get used to the constant hum of the recycler vents or the perpetual gray dimness that passes for daylight. It tastes like rust, damp concrete, and the faint, bitter tang of other people's weariness. Today, though, it tasted like fear. My little brother, Leo, was having a bad day. His small chest was working like a tiny, broken bellows, each breath a painful, wheezing struggle. The cheap inhaler I'd bought with last week's pay was doing next to nothing. His face, usually so full of light even in this dim world, was pale and beaded with sweat, his big brown eyes wide with a kind of quiet panic that broke my heart into 1,000 pieces every time I saw it. "It's okay, Leo," I whispered, dabbing his forehead with a damp cloth. "Just breathe slow, in and out, like we practiced." He tried. He really did. But a harsh cough rattled his small frame, and he curled into a little ball on our lumpy mattress, his breath catching in ragged sobs. He was only 8. He shouldn't have to know this kind of pain, this kind of struggle to do something as simple as breathe. I worked as a cleaner in the transit hubs of the mid-levels. It was a step up from the grime scrubbing jobs in down below, but it was still back-breaking work for not enough credits. Every cycle, I'd save what I could, but Leo's medicine, the filters for our apartment's air purifier, the food, it all just evaporated. Hope was a luxury we couldn't afford. But today, hope was the only thing left. The local Medicaid clinic had turned us away yesterday. "The damp lung is getting worse, Ilara," old Dr. Aris had said, his face etched with a familiar pity. "The standard treatments aren't holding him. There's a new formulation, a gene stabilizer, but it's only available up Spire. At the Central Spire Clinic, the Central Spire. It might as well have been on another planet. It was the glittering needle that pierced the sky. A place for the alphas, the ones who lived in the clean air, under a sun that wasn't filtered through a dozen layers of smog and industry. A place where people like me were not welcome." How much is it?" I'd asked, my voice barely a whisper. He'd avoided my eyes. "It's beyond us, Ilara. Access is restricted. Restricted. The word of our world. Your ID card, a thin plastimetal rectangle fused to your wrist, dictated your life. Mine was a dull gray, a tier 4. It let me into the mid-levels for work, and that was it. The Spire was tier 1 territory, unreachable, but watching Leo struggle, I knew I didn't have a choice. Unreachable or not, I had to try. I left him with our neighbor, a kind, tired woman named Mara, who promised to watch him. I put all the credits I had, a pitifully small stack of digital chits, into my pocket. And then I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I reached into the loose floorboard under my bed and pulled out a small wooden box. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was my mother's IT. Looked almost identical to mine, just older, the edges worn smooth. She died when I was 10. Leo just a baby. She'd always told me to keep it safe. "It's a part of our story, Ilara," she used to say. "Don't ever lose it." It was a tier 4. Just like mine, worthless for getting into the Spire. But it was all I had of her. Tucked beside it was a photo, creased and soft from years of being held. A picture of her and my father smiling, the sky behind them a brilliant, impossible blue. He had left before Leo was born, a ghost in a story I barely knew. My mother said he went looking for a better life for us. He never came back. I slid her ID into my pocket, next to mine. A useless good luck charm. Then, with a deep, shaky breath that tasted of rust and fear, I left my home and started the long journey up. The trip to the mid-levels was familiar. The groaning lifts, the press of bodies, the gradual thinning of the industrial haze. When I stepped out into the mid-level transit hub, the air was already cleaner, the light brighter. People here walked with a purpose mine lacked. Their clothes were cleaner, their faces less etched with worry. I kept my head down, my worn jacket pulled tight, feeling like a ghost haunting their brighter world. Finding the transit line to the upper Spire was an ordeal in itself. The signs were sleek and digital, flashing with information that seemed designed to confuse anyone not born to it. I had to ask for directions twice. The first person, a man in a sharp suit, looked right through me as if I wasn't there. The second, a transit worker, grunted and pointed a thumb towards a gleaming silver platform far across the concourse. Spire Express. Don't bother if you don't have the tier, he said, his eyes flicking to my wrist before dismissing me. My heart hammered against my ribs. Every step towards that platform felt like I was walking on cracking ice. I could feel the stairs. My scuffed boots on the polished floor, my patched trousers, the weary slump of my shoulders. I was a stain on their perfect picture. The Spire Express station was even more intimidating. There were no turnstiles, just shimmering fields of light. People would walk up, their high-tier IDs would flash on their wrists, and the field would ripple, letting them pass through with a soft, musical chime. And then there were the guards, 2 of them, standing on either side of the entrance. They were tall and broad in immaculate white and silver uniforms. They looked like they were carved from stone, their faces set in expressions of bored superiority. They were alphas born and bred in the Spire. You could see it in the easy way. They held themselves, in the clear, untroubled look in their eyes. I took a deep breath, clutching the strap of my empty bag. For Leo, I told myself, just for Leo. I walked towards them, my legs feeling like lead. My throat was so dry I wasn't sure I could speak. As I got closer, one of them, the one with dark, slicked back hair, raised a hand. Halt. State your business. His voice was as cold and sterile as the station around us. I need to get to the Central Spire Clinic, I stammered, my voice small and thin. The second guard, a blonde with a cruel little smirk, snorted. The clinic? That's rich. You have an appointment? No. But my brother, he's very sick. They said there's medicine there that can help him. I can pay, I added quickly, though I knew my handful of credits was nothing to them. The dark-haired guard, Kale, his name tag read, extended a gloved hand. ID. This was it. The moment of failure. My hand trembled as I unclipped my gray Tier 4 ID from my wrist. The plastic metal felt cold and shameful in my palm. I placed it in his hand. He glanced down at it. His lips curled in a sneer. He showed it to his partner, Rorik. Rorik let out a short, sharp laugh. It wasn't a friendly sound. It was sharp and mocking. A sound that cut right through me. A Tier 4, he said, shaking his head in disbelief. A downer thinking she can just waltz into the Spire for a checkup. I'm not. It's not for me, I pleaded, my voice cracking. It's for my brother. He's just a little boy. Please, just let me talk to someone at the clinic. I'll do anything. Kale dangled my ID between his thumb and forefinger as if it were something dirty. The only thing this ID gets you is a ride back down to the muck you crawled out of. The clinic is for citizens. Real ones. His words were a physical blow. The shame was a hot flush that crept up my neck and burned my cheeks. The people waiting for the express train were starting to stare, some with pity, most with the same detached amusement as the guards. I felt myself shrink, my entire existence withering under their gaze, and then Rorik started to laugh. Not a snort this time, but a full-blown, ugly laugh that echoed in the high-ceilinged station. He pointed at me, his face red with mirth. She'll do anything, he mimicked in a high-pitched, pathetic voice. Did you hear that, Kale? She'll do anything. Kale chuckled, a low, rumbling sound. Maybe she can clean the platform. With her tongue, the laughter was like a swarm of angry wasps, stinging and relentless. It filled my ears, my head, my heart. All the years of being invisible, of being looked down on, of struggling just to exist, it all came crashing down on me in that moment. Tears welled in my eyes, hot and thick. I wanted to run, to disappear, to sink back into the familiar grayness of down below where at least the shame was a dull ache and not this sharp public humiliation. My world narrowed to their laughing faces, the polished floor, and the worthless piece of plastic that defined my life. Despair washed over me, cold and absolute. It was over. Leo was going to, my hand still in my pocket, brushed against my mother's ID. A desperate, foolish thought sparked in my mind. Maybe they'd take pity? See, it was an old family thing. It was stupid. It was pointless. But it was all I had left, With a shaking hand, I pulled it out. Wait, I whispered, my voice choked with tears. I have another one. Rorik's laughter hitched as he looked at the second ID. Oh, this is good, he wheezed, wiping a tear from his eye. She's got a whole collection. What's this one, a tier 5? Kale snatched it from my hand, his amusement turning to irritation. This is over. Get out of here before I have you cited for loitering. He held the two IDs together, my new one and my mother's old worn one. He was about to toss them back at me. I reached out, a sob caught in my throat, my fingers brushing against the old ID he held. And that's when it happened. On the face of my mother's ID, in the bottom right corner, was a small, faded design I'd never paid much attention to. It looked like a stylized bird or a flame, so worn down it was barely visible. As my desperate, trembling thumb pressed against it, a light bloomed from within the old plastic dot. It wasn't a flicker. It was a deep, warm, golden glow that pulsed with a soft, steady rhythm. It bathed Kale's gloved hand in light, casting long shadows across the pristine floor. The laughter died in Rorik's throat, replaced by a choked gasp. Kale froze, his eyes wide, staring at the impossible light emanating from the worthless piece of tier 4 junk. The world went silent. The soft hum of the station, the distant chatter, the musical chimes of the transit gate, it all faded away. The only thing that existed was that soft, golden light. Then, a new sound cut through the silence. Not the chime of the gate, but a deeper, more resonant tone that came from the ID itself. A 3-note melody, clear and pure, that I had never heard before. It echoed through the station, churning every head. The system responded. The shimmering gate in front of us flickered from blue to a brilliant, respectful gold. A calm female voice, the station's automated system, spoke from hidden speakers. Its tone was different now. Not informational, but reverent. Founder's mark recognized. Line of Aryan. Welcome, inheritor. Kale dropped the IDs as if they had burned him. They clattered to the floor, but only one of them was glowing. A little golden heart beating in the center of the sterile, white station. Inheritor, Founder's mark, Line of Aryan. The words meant nothing to me. I stared at the glowing card, my mind a complete blank. The two guards were no longer laughing. Their faces were as pale as their uniforms, their eyes filled with a terror that was deeply satisfying to see. They looked from the glowing ID on the floor to my face, their arrogance completely stripped away, replaced by raw primal fear. I don't understand, was all I could manage to whisper. Before anyone could say another word, two things happened at once. A silent alarm began flashing on the guard's wrist. Comes a frantic red pulse. And from a previously unnoticed door beside the transit gate, a woman emerged, walking quickly and with an authority that made the two guards snap to attention, their bodies rigid with dread. She was tall and elegant, with silver hair pulled back, in a severe bun, and a face that was sharp and intelligent. She wore a dark blue uniform that was clearly a mark of high office. Her eyes, the color of a storm cloud, swept over the scene, the terrified guards, the stunned onlookers, the glowing ID on the floor, and finally me. Her expression was unreadable, but there was no mockery in it, only a profound, startling intensity. What is the meaning of this? She asked, her voice calm but carrying an immense weight. Kale swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. Administrator Valerius, ma'am. This individual. Her ID. He couldn't finish the sentence. The administrator. Valerius didn't look at him. Her gaze was fixed on me. She took a step closer, her eyes dropping to the glowing card. She knelt down, not with the awkwardness of the guards, but with a fluid, respectful grace, and picked it up. She held it in her palm, her expression one of utter fascination, like an archaeologist who had just unearthed a relic from a lost age. It's real, she murmured, almost to herself. After all these centuries, the signal is authentic. She looked up at me, and for the first time I felt seen. Not as a downer or a tier 4, but as a person, as something more. You are from the line of Aryan, she said, her voice softer now. It wasn't a question. Your family were founders. They helped build Ethelberg on the principle that the city should serve all its people, not just a select few. I just stared at her, my mind reeling. Founders? My family? Scrappers and cleaners from down below? It made no sense. My mother had been a mender of filtration units. My father, I didn't even know what he was. That can be, I said, my voice shaky. We're nobody. History has a way of forgetting things it finds inconvenient, Valerius said, her eyes glinting. She stood up, still holding the glowing ID. Your family went into hiding generations ago, during the Great Divide, when the tiers were established. They believed the system was a betrayal of everything they'd built. Their line was thought to be extinguished. The founder's mark was relegated to myth, a children's story. She turned her sharp gaze on the two guards, who seemed to be trying to shrink into their own boots. And what, precisely, were you doing when this myth revealed itself? She asked, her voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level. Rorik looked like he was about to be sick. Kale, to his credit, found his voice, though it was strained. Ma'am, she was attempting to access the Spire with a tier for ID. We were following protocol, and was laughter part of that protocol? Valerius's voice was like ice. Was public humiliation a required step in the procedure? Tell me, Officer Rorik, what did you find so amusing? Rorik went from pale to ghostly white. Ma'am, I apologize. It was unprofessional. Valerius repeated, savoring the word. You will both report to civic readjustment for a full inquiry. You will surrender your uniforms and credentials. Now, they didn't hesitate. They fumbled with the clasps on their pristine uniforms, their hands shaking so badly they could barely manage it. In a matter of seconds, they were standing there in their gray undershirts, stripped of all their authority, looking small and pathetic. They handed their sidearms and cum units to another pair of guards who had appeared as if from nowhere. Then, with their heads bowed in utter disgrace, they were led away. The crowd of onlookers who had been watching with rapt attention began to disperse, whispering amongst themselves, not wanting to draw the administrator's attention. Valerius turned back to me. The storm in her eyes had calmed. She held out the glowing ID. This belongs to you, inheritor. I took it numbly. The golden light felt warm against my skin. Inheritor. The word echoed in my head. My name is Ilara, I said quietly. A small smile touched her lips. Ilara, she repeated. It is an honor. Now, you said you needed to get to the clinic. That your brother is ill. The world snapped back into focus. Leo. In all the chaos, I had almost forgotten. The panic surged back, raw and urgent. Yes, my brother Leo. He can't breathe. The doctor in Down Below said he needs a gene stabilizer. Say no more, Valerius said, raising a hand. She spoke into her wrist. Come, her voice crisp and commanding. Dispatched Spire's top respiratory team to my location. Full alpha-level medkit. We have a medical priority, Code Aureus. She looked at me. Give me your address, Ilara. I stammered out the sector and block number of our tiny apartment in Down Below. The place that, just an hour ago, felt like the whole world. A cage of rust and smog. They will be there in minutes, she assured me. He will be brought here, to the Spire. He will receive the best care the city has to offer. At no cost, of course. It is your birthright. Birthright. The word was so big, so foreign. I couldn't wrap my head around it. All I could process was, he will receive the best care. The tears I had been fighting back finally fell. Not tears of shame or despair, but of a relief so profound it buckled my knees. The weight of years. The constant, crushing pressure of just trying to survive. Of trying to keep Leo alive. It all just released. I sobbed, ugly, gasping sobs. Right there on the polished floor of the Spire Express station, I expected Valerius to be impatient or uncomfortable. Instead, she put a steadying hand on my arm. It's all right, she said, her voice surprisingly gentle. Everything is different now. She led me through the golden gate, which chimed its three-note melody again as I passed. The express train was waiting, a sleek silver tube empty except for us. As we glided silently upwards, I watched the city fall away below. The grimy mid-levels, and far, far below that, the dark, smoky haze that shrouded down below. My home. It looked so small from up here. The spire was breathtaking. It wasn't just clean, it was vibrant. Gardens bloomed on terraces, waterfalls cascaded down glass walls, and the air was sweet. I took a deep breath, and it was like drinking cool, clear water after a lifetime of thirst. It didn't taste like rust or fear. It tasted like life. Valerius took me to an office that was larger than my entire apartment block. One wall was a window that looked out over the entire city, bathed in the light of a real, unfiltered sun. The founder's mark, she explained, gesturing for me to sit on a chair so soft it felt like a cloud, is tied directly to the city's central charter and its resource vaults. Your family, the line of Aryan, established a trust, a massive one. It was meant to be a safety net, to ensure the core principles of the city were never forgotten. When your ancestors went into hiding, the trust was sealed, accessible only by this mark. She tapped a screen on her desk, and a complex diagram appeared. For generations, it has been accumulating interest. The wealth, it's staggering. By law, as the sole recognized inheritor, it is all yours. I stared at the numbers on the screen. They were meaningless. A string of zeros that my mind couldn't even comprehend. Wealth, money, credits. I'd spent my entire life scraping for them, and now I was being told I had more than I could ever imagine. But only one thing mattered. Leo? I asked, my voice small. Valerius smiled. He is on his way. The finest medical suite in the city is being prepared for him. He will have everything he needs. I promise you. And he did. They brought him up in a medical transport that looked like something out of a dream. He was asleep, his face peaceful for the first time I could remember. They settled him into a private room that looked more like a luxury apartment than a hospital. It had the same incredible view as Valerius's office. I sat by his bedside for hours, just holding his hand and watching the steady, easy rhythm of his breathing on a monitor. The wheezing was gone. The painful struggle was gone. The doctors, who treated me with a deference that was dizzying, explained the treatment. They said he would make a full recovery. More than that, they could repair the underlying genetic damage. He would be completely cured. He would be able to run and play and shout, to live a normal life. A life I had never dared to dream he could have. Later that evening, Valerius came to the room. She handed me a new ID for my wrist. It was a beautiful thing, made of a pearlescent material that shifted in the light. In the corner, the founder's mark was now etched in glowing gold thread. This will give you access to anywhere in Ethelberg, she said, and to your family's assets. There are other things, residences, archives, responsibilities. We can talk about those when you're ready. I looked at the ID, then at my brother's sleeping face. He looked so small in the big, clean bed. A little boy from down below, now sleeping amongst the clouds. Why? I asked her, my voice quiet. Why did they hide? My family. Why did they let the city become this? I gestured to the window, to the stark division between the glittering spire and the darkness below. Valerius's expression grew somber. They didn't just hide, Ilara. They were hunted. The architects of the tier system saw their egalitarian ideals as a threat. Your ancestors left behind more than just wealth. They left behind writings, plans, a blueprint for the city they intended to build, a city without walls between its people. She looked at me, her eyes full of a new dawning hope. Perhaps they weren't just hiding. Perhaps they were waiting for the right person to come along and remind everyone of what was lost. The weight of her words settled on me, a different kind of weight than the one I had carried my whole life. This wasn't the weight of despair, but of purpose. I looked down at the glowing emblem on my new ID. They had laughed at me. They had called me worthless, a piece of junk from the muck. They had tried to break me, but they had broken themselves. Against a history they had forgotten, against a truth that had just been sleeping, this emblem wasn't just a key to a new life for me and Leo. It was a question. It was a challenge. And as I watched the first true stars I had ever seen begin to dot the darkening sky, I knew, with a certainty that filled every part of my being, that I was going to be the answer. Everything had changed. Not just for me, But for all of Ethelberg, it had to, and it would start now.